What if the most strategic mission field in the world isn't, across an ocean, but it's actually across a boardroom table?
Or behind a screen of code.
Right. Or embedded in a multi-million-dollar balance sheet. That's the opening question for our deep dive today. And it's a question that, well, it lands with a lot of intrigue, but also, I think, a good deal of discomfort for a lot of high-capacity professionals.
I think so too.
We're going to be looking at a framework called the L.I.F.E commitment. And it radically reframes the role of people who lead teams, manage huge complexity, and steward massive influence in the global mission landscape.
And our mission today really is to unpack the source material around this. It describes the subtle but very persistent internal tension.
The quiet crisis.
That's the one, the quiet crisis where professional success and spiritual significance have just slowly, drifted apart. We want to challenge that assumption that your main role is just to support from the sidelines while, others do the real work.
Okay, so what's the initial diagnosis here? What's the core problem we're trying to solve?
The initial diagnosis is absolutely crucial because what it identifies is a systemic failure of imagination. It's not a failure of character.
A failure of imagination. I like that.
Yeah, there's this serious disconnect. So on one side, you have these incredible people, the goers, who are called to the front line. They're deeply committed, but often, well, they're under-resourced, especially in things like institutional knowledge or specialized expertise.
And then on the other side?
On the other side, you have the professionals, the financial wizards, the tech gurus, the physicians, the legal strategists. I mean, they possess exactly the complex skills and the credibility that the modern mission landscape is crying out for.
And yet they so often feel disqualified. Why is that?
It's that disconnect again. They feel their calling is, well, unclear. They see their professional skills as secondary, maybe useful for a fundraising dinner.
But not for the actual strategy.
Exactly, not integral to the strategic advance of the mission itself. And the tragedy, as our sources really emphasize, it isn't a lack of generosity. It's not a lack of willingness.
Yeah.
It is a profound lack of a shared vision for how their unique capacity fits in.
That feeling that your skills are only useful for writing checks. That's what we're calling the quiet crisis hiding in plain sight. And I suspect a lot of listeners, they really feel this.
Yeah.
They've absorbed this false cultural divide between the sacred, which is, visible church stuff, and the secular, which is their demanding, very successful day job.
And the practical result of that divide is just deeply harmful. The professional concludes that their expertise, the very skills they've honed for decades, must be spiritually peripheral.
Which has to create an internal conflict.
A huge dissonance. Success at work, but this sense of profound underutilization when it comes to things that have eternal significance. They're successful people just waiting for a mission that never seems to land on their desk.
Okay, so let's get into the antidote to that. The sources present this really profound theological reframe. The theology of the sender. This isn't a new idea, is it? It's more of a rediscovery.
Exactly. It's rediscovering an ancient pattern. You can see this model laid out so clearly in the New Testament. I mean, if you look at 3 John 8, the Apostle John is commending those who supported traveling workers, and he concludes, "We ought therefore to show hospitality to such people so that we may work together for the truth."
Work together for the truth. That phrase feels important.
It is incredibly significant. The Greek term he uses there is synergoi. It means co-workers.
Co-workers, not donors.
Precisely. This isn't passive support, it's active partnership. It establishes the sender as an equal partner in the work, not just, a sponsor on the sidelines.
So this really upgrades that old rope holders analogy, doesn't it?
It really does.
We all know that image. Someone goes into a dangerous cave, others hold the rope, but that's a bit transactional. This synergoi idea elevates it.
Well, the sender is the one who secures the anchor, right? They engineer the rope system, they absorb the financial risk, they apply intelligence to the whole operation and ensure it's all sustainable. The goer and the sender, they literally rise or fall together. Their success is completely inseparable.
And historically, we've kind of minimized that role of the sender. We've reduced it almost entirely to just transactional giving.
Yeah, to tithing. We see it as a minimum requirement instead of a high calling that requires the full deployment of your entire vocation and all of your stewardship.
So why is this shift so necessary right now? Why can't we just keep relying on the passion and goodwill that have sustained the mission for centuries?
Because the global environment has changed. I mean, it has changed dramatically. The mission fields of today are unbelievably
They're
complex.
not just open doors.
Not at all. You have closed nations, restricted communities, complex humanitarian crises. These are often opened only by business or education or high-level healthcare, technology, legal frameworks, not by preaching alone.
Modern problems need specialized solutions.
They absolutely do. And global-level professionalism. Passion is essential, but passion on its own, it can't manage international regulatory scrutiny or navigate complex financial compliance. It can't develop the secure communication platforms you need to operate safely in high-risk zones. The future belongs to senders who can apply these specialized skills. That's why we need L.I.F.E.
Okay, let's unpack this. The L.I.F.E. commitment. This framework, it reframes sending not as a support function, but as a high calling. A calling that requires the full deployment of your professional assets. Leadership, influence, finances, and expertise. So let's start with L leadership.
So leadership here is about leveraging your authority, your decision-making influence to strategically create environments where the gospel witness can actually flourish.
Okay, but we're not just talking about joining a mission board, are we?
No. We're talking about deploying your deep organizational, administrative, and strategic acumen in service of kingdom ends.
But hold on, doesn't that create a conflict, with your fiduciary duties at work? A CEO's primary mandate is to the shareholders. How does this L principle work in the day-to-day pressure of maximizing profit?
That's a great question, and it's where the stewardship mindset is key. Think about a biblical model, like Joseph in Egypt. His administrative brilliance didn't just save Egypt, it preserved the lineage of Israel and strategically positioned the gospel narrative for centuries to come.
Or Nehemiah.
Or Nehemiah, he wasn't a prophet, he was a political leader, the king's cupbearer. He leveraged his government access and his administrative know-how to get resources, to get permits, to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem.
So their leadership wasn't just incidental to their faith.
It was integral. So when a professional today uses their deep understanding of systems design or logistics to build resilient, sustainable frameworks for frontline organizations, their leadership becomes a force multiplier. It allows the goers to focus on what only they can do.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about the enduring structure. Okay, let's move to I, influence. Now, when I hear influence, I admit I get a little worried. It sounds like leveraging relationships, maybe unethically. Is this just about calling your powerful friends when a crisis hits? What do the sources mean by social capital?
And that is exactly the tension the sources want to address. This kind of influence is distinct from manipulation. It's about using your relational networks and your credibility, that social capital you've earned through years of integrity, to open doors that others simply cannot.
So it's credibility as a kind of missional currency.
Precisely. The classic example is Esther, right? Her royal position wasn't just for her own comfort, it was positioned for such a time as this. Her access, which started as a matter of personal safety, became the strategic key to saving an entire nation.
What's the professional analog today?
Well, think of a successful legal expert who has access to high-level government circles in a restrictive country, or a banking executive whose professional reputation provides instant legitimacy when you're dealing with foreign financial institutions. That credibility is earned through just relentless integrity and professional excellence. And that, in turn, grants you access where traditional ministry would be impossible or immediately shut down.
That earned trust becomes a critical asset.
So,
Okay, moving on to F, finances. This is probably the one most professionals are already familiar with, but the L.I.F.E. framework seemed to suggest a pretty big mindset shift is needed here.
it demands a fundamental reorientation. We have to stop asking that default question, which is, how much should I give? That frames money as, a tax or an obligation.
So what's the new question?
The L.I.F.E. framework shifts the question to, how has God entrusted me with this entire financial ecosystem, and how should it be strategically stewarded for maximum kingdom impact?
So it's about managing your capital, not just donating your income.
Yes. And it introduces a radical and honestly an often uncomfortable idea, risk deployment.
Risk deployment.
It's brilliantly illustrated in the parable of the talents, the servant who gets condemned. He wasn't condemned for theft or extravagance. He was condemned for risk avoidance, for inactivity, for burying the money out of fear.
Wow.
And that is a sharp lesson for the risk-averse professional. Capital that isn't managed by a kingdom vision, it just defaults to comfort, to preservation. Kingdom capital, by definition, has to be deployed to absorb strategic risk so that obedience can flourish on the front lines. The sender creates the financial stability that allows the goer to move into volatile situations.
That is a challenging thought for someone whose whole life is built around maximizing security and mitigating risk. We're being asked to deploy our assets to absorb risk for others.
That's the shift.
Okay, finally we arrive at expertise. How is this different from leadership?
Leadership is about your systemic authority. Expertise is about your technical proficiency. It's the translation of that specialized skill into a missional asset.
So give me an example.
If you're a cybersecurity expert, your expertise isn't just for a corporate firewall. It's essential for protecting the anonymity and safety of workers who are operating under threat. If you're a doctor specializing in tropical medicine, your expertise literally saves lives and provides a legitimacy that opens doors. We have to see these professional skills as essential missionary infrastructure.
Can you give us a few more tangible, modern examples from the sources? Secure communication can feel a little abstract.
Sure, think of a mergers and acquisitions attorney. Their knowledge of international contract law could allow a mission to establish a sustainable business venture in a hostile territory, providing both jobs and cover. Or a data scientist who develops algorithms to map human trafficking routes, allowing intervention groups to act with precision, not just goodwill.
These are mission-critical skills.
Yeah.
And the sources tie this all the way back to the Apostle Paul. He was a tent maker.
He was, and in a sense, he was a synagogue himself. Paul's tent making, it provided him with economic sustainability, sure, but more importantly, it granted him cultural legitimacy and relational access to the marketplace. His expertise created credibility and space for his witness.
This whole L.I.F.E. framework, it's fantastic, but it really forces us to go back and confront that initial problem, that sacred versus secular divide. None of this can work if we still see our Tuesday afternoon spreadsheet as less holy than Sunday morning worship.
Exactly. To really deploy L.I.F.E., we have to uproot the false theological assumption that created the quiet crisis in the first place. That sacred-secular divide, as the sources argue, is a late and impoverished inheritance, more Greek than biblical. It just doesn't exist in the foundational texts.
You mentioned the creation narrative earlier.
Yes. Scripture views work not as a curse, but as a calling embedded in creation itself. In Genesis, humanity is commanded to work it and keep it. And what's fascinating is the Hebrew verbs used there for work and keep are the same verbs used later to describe the tasks of the priests ministering in the temple.
So the initial mandate for human work had this holy, almost priestly context from the very beginning.
From the beginning. The Bible doesn't divide life into two compartments, spiritual and non-spiritual. We've imposed that structure onto it.
And the correction is?
The correction is clear and direct. Colossians says, "Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men." Professional excellence, therefore, isn't a distraction from discipleship or mission. It's one of its most potent, visible expressions. The tragedy isn't a lack of commitment from professionals, it's a theological underdevelopment in the wider church that hasn't given them a category for their success.
When you look at it through that lens, the internal shift required here is just, it's monumental.
It is. The L.I.F.E. framework moves you from a posture of ownership clinging tightly to self-advancement and financial security to one of radical stewardship. It's a faithful deployment of entrusted assets, whether those assets are a billion-dollar company or a specialized skill set.
And significance. The very thing so many successful people are chasing.
It only truly emerges when their professional work is aligned and leveraged for God's eternal purposes, not just human metrics like stock prices or year-end reviews.
You know, this entire exploration, it's really not meant to be an indictment on how you've operated in the past. It feels much more like a profound invitation to see your present capacity through a completely new lens.
That's right.
So if you're a leader or professional who has felt that subtle tension we talked about, that success has somehow outpaced true significance, that feeling, that quiet crisis, that might just be the first signal of your calling clarifying itself. It's holy ground.
And to connect all this to the bigger picture, your work is not a detour from the mission. It may, in fact, be one of its most strategic and necessary pathways today. The ultimate question really isn't whether you're called to the mission because you are. The question is whether you are prepared to see your life through the proactive, strategic lens of L.I.F.E. and step into that high calling of being a sender.
We'll leave you with this final provocative thought drawn right from the source material. The future of global mission may hinge less on finding more people willing to go across an ocean, and far more on awakening those already positioned to send from a desk, a platform, or a balance sheet, because the rope is already in your hands.